Hello, welcome back to my channel if you are new or if you're returning. What's up? Glad to have you again. Today I'm going to be going through all of the books that I read in January, my January wrap up, and I'm just gonna be going over what I liked about each book, what I didn't like about each book, a few comments here and there. I'm sure you know the drill, but January wrap up, these are the books that I spent time with in this wonderful January. So without further ado, let's go. So to kick off the new year, I read Frostblood by Ellie Blake. I read the entire series, which consists of Frostblood, Fireblood, and Nightblood. I actually have a reading vlog up on my channel of me going through all of that. So if you're looking for me to go through those books more thoroughly, please head over to that video and check it out. In regards to the rating of those books, I gave Frostblood, which was the first one, 2.5 stars. I did not love it. I definitely had questions related to it, and it just was not my favorite, hence the rating. And then Fireblood, I gave 3 stars. It was my favorite of the 3 novels. I think the way that Ellie Blake wrote this second book gave a lot of promise to the story and had me looking forward to kind of seeing where she was going with it. So the second book got 3 stars from me, but unfortunately we went a bit downhill going into Nightblood. And then the 4th book I read in 2025, which it's actually interesting because I finished a book in between Fireblood and Nightblood. I gave 2 stars. I did not like the way that the story ended. It felt a little rushed, and as evidenced in my reading vlog, I felt the whole story was pretty predictable. The characters felt a bit recycled. There was nothing new or exciting about them. There was your standard run-of-the-mill female main character and male main character. So nothing blew me away there. I think it was still a series worth reading, and I'm glad I read it, but it was not something that blew me out of the water. And for more thoughts on that series, you'll have to watch my reading vlog. Frostblood was first, and then Fireblood, and then I read The Good News of Our Limits by Sean McGyver in between Fireblood and Nightblood. This book I rated 4 stars, and it talks about how we cannot do everything that we want to do in this world, despite the fact that I would like to do 85 things at any given time in the same 60 minutes of every day. So it was a great refresher on the importance of focusing on what is most valuable to you, and I really enjoyed it just as someone who is chronically making to-do lists and chronically feeling like I don't have enough time in a day. So that was my 3rd book of the year, and I rated it 4 stars. My 5th book of the year was Galatea by Madeline Miller. This was a short story detailing the Greek myth of Galatea, and I did not know anything about this myth going into it. It was kind of just a work by Madeline Miller that I hadn't read yet, and I was like, sold, absolutely. I need to read this. And so it follows a statue that is brought to life by this artist, and it talks about themes on beauty and the relationships between husbands and wives, interestingly enough. And it details the price of beauty depending on the society in which you live in and depending on who you associate with and the state of the world. Beauty can be seen as something to be put on exhibit instead of something that someone just possesses. It's something that someone else possesses someone else for. The discourse on beauty in this book was interesting to me. In our day and age, beauty is just something that some people possess or some things possess or nature possesses. But in this book, it talks about how beauty is seen as something that can be exhibited and the fight for people to have that in their possession. So in this book, it talks about Galatea and how she is beautiful and how someone possesses her for her beauty and how she kind of comes to be. And I'm not going to go too much farther into it because I think it speaks for itself. So I will let you get to that on your own time. My 6th book of the year was The Shadows Between Us by Trisha Levenseller. She also wrote the Daughter of the Pirate King series, which I've not gotten to. I went into this book kind of expecting the typical romantasy female main character who is bloodthirsty, male main character who is morally gray, evilish. Is he actually morally gray? In this book, I would actually say, yeah, he was actually morally gray. And I will say it wrapped up pretty nicely. I did enjoy reading it. When I first picked it up and I had gotten through the first 2 or 3 chapters, I thought this book was definitely not going to be for me. Just the way it was written, I was ready to hightail it out of there in a few more chapters, but it pleasantly surprised me. We see the main character grow and change and kind of change up her whole plans for being where she is. So the plot of this is basically a second daughter wants the respect and the attention and authority of someone who is married to the king of their land, but she doesn't want to marry the king. She wants to be queen. And and she wants to be the only ruler. So she comes in guns blazing, like, I'm gonna get close to the king and I'm gonna kill him. And slowly her tune starts to change. This book was pleasantly surprising, just the way the two personalities interacted with each other, and I don't know if I would have picked it up at any other time or if I would have kept reading it at any other time, but I'm glad that I picked it up when I did and that I finished reading it, because it was such an interesting twist on it. Like, I really expected the characters to honestly just be flatter than they actually were and not as dynamic. And honestly, to sum up this book, I had my expectations set low. I didn't think this book was going to be that amazing, so I set low expectations, and that served me well because I was pleasantly surprised. I didn't end up rating this book. I don't think I was able to figure out where it stood for me. This was just a fun little book that took spot 6 of my January 2025 reads. Following that was book number 7, which was Foster by Claire Keegan. And this was my first Claire Keegan book, which I feel is monumentous. If you are someone in the literary fiction space at all, or someone who follows some pretty popular voices in the booktube community, then I feel that Claire Keegan is someone you would have heard of. But if you have not, Claire Keegan is a remarkable writer. She does strictly literary fiction, to my understanding, and she wins all of the awards. Her first book won an award, which was Antarctica. Her second book won an award. She is very well decorated in the writer space, and after reading Foster by her, I understand why. Jack Edwards here on YouTube said something that I found pretty profound when it comes to reading. He said that he's more impressed by a phenomenal short book than a phenomenal long book because of the talent it takes to say so much in so few pages. And ever since he said that, I have really kind of thought about that more as I'm reading these books, reading these novels, kind of dissecting the themes, looking at what the book's saying, and reading Claire Keegan, who is someone he has talked about previously. I saw it. Foster is about a girl who lives with a family who has one too many kids, and for the summer gets sent to live with a family that she has never met before. And so the story picks up with her getting dropped off, and we follow her throughout the summer, learning the ins and outs of this new place, the husband and wife who take her in, and just seeing her adjust to being an only child for the first time, whereas in her actual family, she's one of 6 or 7 or some crazy big number like that. There were so many points in this book where I was amazed by the sheer density of each sentence. It felt like reading it once wasn't enough, and I had to extract every little ounce of meaning from it. The word choice that she used was stellar. Every word felt so punctuated and articulate and exactly what she was trying to say. And there's something so satisfying reading it and just knowing this was the exact word she was looking for, and that's why it was used. So I didn't end up rating this book, but it would definitely be between a 4 and a 5 for me. I just think it's very well done, and I'm definitely a new fan of Claire Keegan. I have small things like these shortlisted after reading Foster. So I read for book number 7 of January, One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig, and this was a book that I got from the library because you know me, I'm not gonna buy a book if I haven't read it. So the first time I sat down to read One Dark Window, I only got to read it for maybe a half an hour, and then the second time I sat down to read it, same thing, only really half an hour. So I didn't build a ton of momentum going into it, but then the third time I sat down to read it, I had like an hour, 2 hours, and the momentum that I gained. I don't know what I expected from this book, but I had heard that it was fantastic, that people loved the concept, and that it wasn't something that they've ever read before. And I just want to say that there's a reason that I read this book last month and it's already in my hands. When I finished this book, it was a 4.75 stars, very close to a 5. However, I was a little hesitant to give it a 5. And then I kept thinking about it and thinking about it and thinking about it and realized this is a 5-star book. The thing that makes this book shine is honestly the humor. I'm not someone who laughs out loud at books, but this book had me laughing out loud 4 or 5 times. There was a point where I stopped and had to read a section to my husband because I was so amazed at the humor that was used in this one section. The humor was used so well. It dispersed some tension in some super serious moments and made the book really, really fun. Every character on the page jumps out. They all are very distinct. The side characters shine. Emery, the side characters shined, but they did not outshine the main characters. So Raven and Elspeth are two main characters, and we follow them as Elspeth is kind of dealing with this demon that is living inside Elspeth's head and has been since she was 11. And we follow her as they eventually team up for this mission to kind of overthrow the king's tyrannical idea of how the magic in this world should be used. And they team up with the second heir to the throne. Raven's little brother shines in this. There was a section where he had this perfect zinger that had me cracking up, and I ran to Barnes & Noble to buy the second book when I saw that the wait in my library was crazy long. So I just had a feeling when I finished this book that this was going to be a series that I was going to want to return to. I mean, it was almost a 5-star and ended up being a 5-star for me. And so I sprinted over to Barnes & Noble, picked up the second book. And it was actually so fun being at Barnes & Noble because the cashier, when I was checking out, asked about the book. She said she'd seen a lot of people reading it and that she was currently reading Throne of Glass. She was doing the tandem read, and it was just such a fun opportunity to talk to someone who reads similar books. It was a great experience, and I was glad that I got to do that because I wanted book 2. And so book number 8 of January was Two Twisted Crowns, and it lived up to every amount of hype that book 1 gave. It took a more serious tone just because of the cliffhanger we're left on One Dark Window. That didn't stop it from being an outstanding sequel to book 1. Still had all the characters we loved. Another 5-star read for me. We're looking at 10 stars. This is a 10-star photo right here. 10 stars. And I actually have a video that I'm going to insert after this of me reading One Dark Window or just finishing One Dark Window because I knew I had so many thoughts that I wanted to talk about. So I'll insert that now. I'm making tea, but like, we need to talk about this book. Like, we need to chat about One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. We need to talk about it. I started reading this book because it was one of the books that was ready first from my library, and I knew it was a duology. I knew the general premise of it, and it just was one of the ones that came up first. And so I really didn't expect too much from it. The kettle right now is just going off. I really didn't expect too much from it. I knew there was a bunch of hype surrounding it, but I didn't think that it would be anything to like knock my socks off or blow me out of the water, just because with a lot of books that I feel like have a lot of hype, I don't always share the same sentiments as Book Talk or Bookstagram, mainly Book Talk. But I know that that book was super, super popular. And so it was on my radar for a little bit. I wanted to see kind of what the deal was. And when I tell you it knocked my socks off, the magic system is so unique. I love all of the characters. Like, this book was done beautifully. I am not someone who laughs when I read or like laughs out loud, but this book, I laughed out loud 4 times. 4 times. It was so funny. The use of humor in this book was just done so well and so masterfully. It really lightened up some scenes where it was getting really tense, and then all of a sudden like, there would just be this one-liner that would just jump off the page, and I was cackling. I was laughing. There were so many times that I literally put my book down and said to my husband, like, this book is funny. And so I'm super excited about the next book. My tea's done. Before I started Two Twisted Crowns, I needed to say that like this book was a 4.75 out of 5 for me. It might be a 5-star. Like, I don't know at this point. Like, as soon as I finished it, I knew that it was gonna be way up there for me, which is surprising. I didn't think I would enjoy this book as much as the general populace said this book needed to be enjoyed. I definitely thought it was overhyped, and honestly now I think it's maybe a touch underhyped, maybe appropriately hyped. I haven't really seen anything about it recently, but like, it needs more hype. It needs all of the hype. I didn't want to get into the second book without at least sharing my thoughts about the first book. And in general, phenomenal, amazing, fantastic, very well done, and so freaking excited for Two Twisted Crowns. So with One Dark Window and Two Twisted Crowns both being 5 stars and being books 7 and 8 on my January reads list, I bought them and they have secured a place on my TBRR, so I am so, so, so looking forward to jumping back into that world, seeing the humor, seeing the characters, kind of reading the story in a new light as I know how it ends and how it wraps up, and I'm able to look for more details on my reread. So I actually miscounted. So One Dark Window was book 8 and Two Twisted Crowns was book 9. So to sum up my January, book 1 was Frostblood, book 2 was Fireblood, book 3 was The Good News of Our Limits, book 4 was Nightblood, book 5 was Galatea, book 6 was The Shadows Between Us, book 7 was Foster, book 8 was One Dark Window, and book 9 was Two Twisted Crowns. Overall, I'd say this was a pretty good reading month for me and a great start to 2025. I tend to read between 8 and 10 books per month, and we are squarely in the middle of that with 9. I'm super excited to dive into some February reads, and if you're looking for my February TBR or what's next up on my shelf and what I want to be reading next, I have a video that I posted last week kind of going over my as soon as possible queue, so you should check that out. I've already finished my first book in February, and it comes from the list that I talked about in that video. So leave a comment below of which of those books that I talked about in that video you think I've already completed. That's all I have for you guys today, and I am so looking forward to seeing you again soon.